Marcus Blackwood never expected to find that scene when he knocked on the door of apartment 7B to collect overdue rent. A black girl, no more than 12 years old, was hunched over a makeshift pottery wheel, her small hands caked with clay and cracked from constant work, her face marked by exhaustion. Around her, dozens of intricately designed ceramic pieces in various stages of completion filled the otherwise sparse living room. When she looked up, there was a quiet defiance that completely disarmed him. "My mother is resting," she said in a low but firm voice. "Can I help you with anything?" The apartment was small, dimly lit, with a heavy air of a place that holds many struggles. In the corner of the room, a display of finished pottery pieces stood in stark contrast to the worn surroundings, beautiful creations bearing distinctive patterns that seemed to tell stories of ancestral heritage. Marcus, in his tailored Armani suit, suddenly felt out of place, like an intruder in sacred territory. "I'm here about the rent," he said, adjusting his gold cufflinks in an automatic gesture. "You're 3 weeks late." The girl was not intimidated. She calmly wiped her hands on a worn cloth, walked over to a drawer, and took out a crumpled envelope. "It's only 2/3, she explained. "The rest will come when I finish these commissioned pieces for Lux Gallery." Marcus took the envelope and counted the worn bills, feeling a mixture of embarrassment and curiosity. How could a child this age speak so maturely about payments? Why was she working instead of being in school? And where were the responsible adults? At that moment, a violent coughing fit came from the bedroom. The girl wasn't alarmed. She just looked up briefly, as if listening for a familiar sound. "My mother has pulmonary fibrosis," she explained simply. "I have to finish these pieces by tomorrow. Ms. Harrington pays well and always sends more orders." Marcus didn't respond. He was taking in the scene. The small hands marked by calluses and clay burns, the tired but determined eyes, the exquisite pottery that would sell for hundreds in upscale galleries downtown. He had grown up in mansions, attended Ivy League schools, inherited a real estate empire. The contrast between their life experiences was like parallel universes that should never have crossed paths. "What's your name?" he finally asked. "Amara," she replied, returning to the wheel. "Amara Johnson." As he left that apartment, Marcus felt something unusual, a discomfort he couldn't quite name. He was used to seeing his properties as numbers on spreadsheets, not as homes for real people facing daily struggles. In his sleek Bentley, he watched the rundown neighborhood of Westridge Heights through the window. This building was just one of many in his portfolio, purchased as an investment in an up-and-coming area, a term his partners used to describe communities of black and immigrant people who would soon be pushed out by gentrification. 2 days later, an unexpected call interrupted his meeting with investors. "Mr. Blackwood, this is Mercy General Hospital. We're calling about a patient, Naomi Johnson. You were listed as her emergency contact by her daughter." He didn't remember giving Amara his number, but something about the surname made him leave the conference room immediately. At the hospital reception desk, he found Amara sitting alone, the same expression of quiet dignity, but now with red eyes from crying in secret. "They won't let me see her," Amara said without introduction. "They say I'm too young to be alone in the room and that I need a responsible adult. I gave them your number because you own our home." The simplicity of that childish logic hit him hard. To Amara, the landlord was the closest figure of authority she could call on in an emergency. What did that say about this girl's life? While they waited, Marcus learned more. Naomi Johnson was a renowned ceramicist who had been working from home since her illness worsened. Amara had learned pottery by watching her mother and now took on the commissions she couldn't complete. At 12, she managed client communications, negotiated deadlines, and took care of the house by herself. What Marcus didn't know yet was that this encounter would transform his life in ways he could never have predicted. He had no idea that behind that hospital door, a revelation awaited him, one that connected his privileged past to this girl's present, in a way that no one in Westridge Heights could have suspected. Inside Mercy General, Marcus followed Amara to the ICU. A stern-looking nurse stopped them. "Immediate family only," she said, eyeing Marcus suspiciously in his expensive suit. "He's my uncle," Amara lied without hesitation. The nurse looked from one to the other, clearly doubting the kinship between the white executive and the black girl, but relented. Naomi Johnson was hooked up to tubes and monitors, her frail body almost disappearing beneath the hospital sheets. Acute respiratory distress complicated by pulmonary fibrosis. Dr. Winters explained. Ms. Johnson needs extended hospitalization. How long? Marcus asked. At least 3 weeks, then home care. In the privacy of the hallway, Amara finally broke down. They're going to take me away. Who? Social services. If my mother stays here more than 3 days, they'll find out I'm alone. It's happened before. They almost put me in foster care. Just then, a middle-aged black woman with a social worker's badge approached. Amara Johnson, I'm Denise Morris from Child Protective Services. We need to talk about your temporary arrangements. Panic flashed across the girl's face. Marcus realized she was about to run away. She's under my supervision, he said, surprising himself. I'm Marcus Blackwood, the owner of the property where they live. I'm taking care of her temporarily at her mother's request. Denise looked at him skeptically. Do you have any documentation to prove that? I can arrange that. I have a lawyer who can prepare everything today. Over the next few days, Marcus plunged into a world that was strange to him. His lawyer, Jonathan Goldman, thought he was crazy when he explained that he wanted to take temporary custody. Marcus, you have no experience with children. Social services will never approve it. Then get them to approve it, he replied dryly. This girl is not going to foster care. While the legal proceedings were underway, Marcus took Amara to his luxurious penthouse in Skyline Towers. The girl walked as if she were afraid of breaking something just by looking at it. You can choose any room you like, he said. I'd rather stay close to my mother, she replied. I can sleep at the hospital. That's not allowed, Amara, and you need to rest. I have work to do. Ms. Harrington paid me in advance. Marcus looked at her small, calloused hands. We don't need that money right now. I do, she replied intensely. It's my responsibility. The next day, they met with a social worker in Jonathan's office. Mr. Blackwood, it's unusual for a single man with no family ties to request custody of a girl, Denise said. I'm just helping a tenant. The alternative is a system that will separate her from her mother. We need to assess whether this is appropriate. Denise looked at Amara, who remained silent but alert. What do you think, Amara? Would you rather stay with Mr. Prasen, Blackwood, or go to a foster home? Mr. Blackwood lets me work, she replied sincerely. In foster homes, they don't. And if I don't work, we lose our apartment. On the way out, Denise pulled Marcus aside. I'm watching you, Mr. Blackwood. If I find anything suspicious, I'll take immediate action. What no one noticed was Vanessa Reynolds watching them from her parked car. Vanessa, the chief operating officer at Blackwood Properties, was known for her uncompromising nature. When Marcus joined the company after his father's death 5 years earlier, she had seen him as a threat to her control. Now, discreetly photographing the scene, she smiled. Meanwhile, in the days that followed, Marcus discovered something intriguing in the building documents. Your rent hasn't gone up in 3 years, he remarked. All the other properties in the area have been adjusted. My mother said she had an arrangement with the previous property manager, Amara explained. She made custom pottery for his office for free. And now you're taking her place, Marcus stated, connecting the dots. At Blackwood Properties headquarters, Vanessa presented her discovery to the board. Marcus is harboring a black child with no proven relation. The press would have a field day with this. What are you suggesting? Asked one of the members, uncomfortable. I suggest that Marcus is demonstrating emotional instability, putting the company's reputation at risk, she replied coldly. And I propose that we consider actions to protect our interests. What Vanessa didn't know was that while she was planning to use Amara against Marcus, the girl was already weaving her own safety net. Between pottery sessions and hospital visits, she watched, listened, and stored every piece of information, from Marcus's phone conversations to documents he absent-mindedly left on the table. In her school notebook, between math lessons, a meticulous record grew. And somewhere in that tangle of invisible threads was the truth about why, of all the apartments in the city, her mother had insisted on that particular building belonging to the Blackwoods. A truth that would forever change the balance of power in that elite family. A week had passed when Marcus received an unexpected phone call. Vanessa Reynolds requested his immediate presence at Blackwood Properties headquarters for an extraordinary board meeting. The icy tone of his secretary suggested that it was not a friendly summons. "They're going to try to get you out," warned Jonathan when Marcus consulted him. "Vanessa has been digging up information about you and the girl. My sources say she's going to use it to question your mental capacity." Meanwhile, at the hospital, Naomi Johnson's condition had stabilized, but she remained semi-conscious, unable to answer the questions that were piling up. At Marcus's penthouse, Amara worked furiously at her pottery wheel, but it wasn't decorative pieces she was producing. It was pieces of a much larger puzzle. "Are you really going to face them?" Amara asked, looking up from her work as Marcus prepared for the meeting. "I have to. It's my company, too." "Then take this." She handed him her school notebook. Page 27. Marcus opened the notebook and froze. There, meticulously organized, were old newspaper clippings, copies of documents, and precise notes with dates and names. In the center of the page, a yellowed clipping showed a photo of his own father, William Blackwood, standing next to a group of artists. Among them, a young Naomi Johnson. "Where did you get this?" "My mother kept it in a box. She worked in the first Blackwood Gallery curating African-American art." "Your father promised everyone a share of the profits, but then—" Amara left the sentence unfinished, her intense gaze saying the rest. Marcus vaguely remembered an old controversy, something his father had buried under layers of confidentiality agreements. Dozens of black artists from the company's early days had been denied royalties and recognition when the gallery took off. "There's more," Amara continued, turning the page. "Vanessa was the legal director at the time. She was the one who drew up the bogus contracts so no one could complain." When Marcus entered the glass-walled boardroom on the 40th floor, the 9 board members were already seated. Vanessa, impeccable in her gray pantsuit, smiled with the confidence of someone who holds all the cards. "Gentlemen," she began, "I have called this meeting because a serious problem compromises the image of Blackwood Properties." She projected onto the screen the photos of Marcus with Amara leaving social services. "Marcus Blackwood has illegally harbored a black minor with no family connection, putting our company at risk of scandal." Murmurs rippled around the table. Vanessa continued, her voice dripping with false concern. "I propose a temporary leave of absence while we evaluate his leadership abilities." Marcus remained silent as the board members exchanged uncomfortable glances. When Vanessa finished, he simply opened his laptop and connected it to the projector. "Before you vote, I would like to present some documents that have just come to my attention." The original contract signed by his father appeared on the screen, promising royalties and recognition to the company's first 50 black artists, with Naomi Johnson's signature clearly visible. Next was the altered document that had replaced the original, with Vanessa's signature authorizing the change. These documents show how Vanessa Reynolds personally orchestrated the fraud that robbed dozens of black artists of their rightful recognition and compensation. Marcus turned to Vanessa, whose face had turned pale. Compensation that with compound interest would be worth approximately $18 million today. Vanessa stood up abruptly. "This is ridiculous. Documents forged by a child." "These are the originals from my father's files," Marcus interrupted, "which I discovered thanks to Amara Johnson, the daughter of one of the people you helped defraud." Shock rippled through the room. One of the senior advisors took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. "Mr. Peterson," Marcus asked, "you remember that time, don't you? You worked with my father when it all happened." The man nodded slowly. "I remember the rumors, but William assured us that everyone had been properly compensated." "A lie perpetuated by Vanessa," Marcus replied. Then projected emails saved by his father, conversations between Vanessa and William Blackwood discussing how to cover up the fraud they had committed against black artists. Vanessa reached for her cell phone, but Jonathan, who had quietly entered the room, intervened. "Don't worry, Ms. Reynolds. We've already sent copies of these documents to the Department of Justice, the Securities and Exchange Commission, and major news outlets. I suggest you save your calls for your criminal lawyer." For the first time, Vanessa Reynolds, the woman who had built her career on the backs of people like Naomi Johnson, looked vulnerable. Her empire of lies was crumbling as her advisors demanded her immediate resignation. The next day, the newspapers ran headlines. Scandal at Blackwood Properties. Decades of racial discrimination exposed. The company's stock plummeted 30% in the first hours of trading. While Vanessa faced federal investigations, Marcus returned to the hospital where Naomi Johnson had awakened. At her bedside, Amara smiled for the first time since he had met her. "My mother always said that the truth finds its way," the girl said, holding Naomi's frail hand, "even if it takes a generation." What no one could have imagined was that this was only the beginning of an even greater transformation. As Naomi lay in her hospital bed, looking at Marcus and her daughter side by side, an even deeper secret hung between them, one that would redefine not only the company, but the very identity of everyone involved. 3 months after the scandal, the Blackwood name came to represent something completely different in the city. The Blackwood Properties headquarters had been transformed with a new sign at the entrance: Blackwood Johnson Arts Foundation, a change that symbolized more than just a business partnership. Marcus had done the unthinkable. After confirming through DNA testing what his heart already knew, he announced it officially at a press conference. Amara Johnson was his biological niece's late brother David's daughter. "My family's history has been built on the systematic theft of Black people's creativity and dignity," he declared with Amara and a still recovering Naomi at his side. "I can't change the past, but I can rewrite the future." The Blackwood Reparation Fund, established with 40% of the company's shares, began the process of compensating former artists and their families. For the 23 who had already passed away, including some with no known heirs, the money was directed to scholarships for young Black artists in disadvantaged communities. In the new boardroom, where once only white men decided the fate of properties in predominantly Black neighborhoods, representatives from the communities themselves now sat with real decision-making power over investments and development. Vanessa Reynolds, on the other hand, faced multiple federal charges. Her empire of lies, built over decades, collapsed in a matter of weeks. The evidence was irrefutable. Between testimony from former artists and internal documents, the Justice Department built a devastating case. "It was the girl," Vanessa muttered in private conversations with her lawyers. How did a child discover what corporate lawyers hid for decades? The answer was simpler than she imagined. Naomi Johnson had been much more than a ceramicist. As an assistant curator in the gallery's early years, she had access to documents that other artists would never see. Sensing the fraud that was being orchestrated, she began to keep copies. For years, she kept this evidence hidden, waiting for the right moment. "I knew that one day the truth would come out," Naomi explained to Amara as she recovered at home. "So I kept everything that could prove what really happened, the good and the bad." In the former pottery studio, now converted into a proper art space for Amara, uncle and niece had long and sometimes uncomfortable conversations about privilege, about race, about a system that allowed a Black child to work in conditions no white child would ever be allowed to endure. "The real shame isn't that you showed up to collect the rent," Amara said one afternoon as she showed Marcus her new art project. "It's that you never noticed before." The Heritage Reclaimed project transformed the old building where they lived into an arts center with an emphasis on ceramics, sculpture, and entrepreneurship for young people from marginalized communities. The first class, made up of 30 children, was mentored by Amara, who at 13 was already teaching techniques that many professionals didn't know. 6 months after the collapse of the old Blackwood Properties, Vanessa Reynolds was sentenced to 8 years in prison for fraud, forgery, and obstruction of justice. On the same day, the new foundation's urban redevelopment project was approved by the City Council, a plan that would renovate neighborhoods without displacing original residents, with contractual guarantees of affordability for low-income families. "Some people take a lifetime to learn what I learned in 6 months." Marcus reflected during an interview. That wealth without purpose is just empty accumulation. That privilege without responsibility is a form of silent violence. In the family's new home, Naomi was finally regaining her strength. The hands that had worked tirelessly for years now directed a team of artists, creating a line of public art installations that would be donated to schools in underserved areas. One fall afternoon, as Amara glazed a new piece for her mother, Marcus entered the room with an old box. "I found this in my father's storage unit," he said, opening it carefully. Inside were dozens of sketches of pottery designs, all signed by Naomi Johnson, dated 15 years ago. designs that the gallery had used without ever crediting or compensating her properly. "He knew all along that you were the real creator," Marcus said, his voice breaking. "And yet, he allowed Vanessa to carry out that plan." Naomi picked up one of the sketches, running her fingers over the yellowed paper. "I never created for money or recognition. I created because it was what I loved to do." "That's why your designs were so good," Amara replied proudly. "That's why mine are too." That night, as the city slept, 3 generations united by blood, separated by privilege, and finally reconnected by justice, planned a future where merit and opportunity would not be determined by the color of one's skin or the zip code of one's birth. A man who discovered that his true inheritance was not in the real estate he owned, but in the family he almost didn't know. A woman whose talent was stolen, but whose dignity remained intact. And a girl who, with clay and determination, molded not just pottery, but a bridge between worlds that seemed irreconcilable. While thousands of children like Amara continue to face invisible barriers every day, stories like this remind us that real change begins when those in power choose to see beyond their own privilege. If this story touched your heart, remember that small acts of courage can challenge entire systems of injustice, proving that true legacy isn't measured by bank accounts, but by the lives we transform along the way.